So my talk is going to bridge between medicine, engineering, and design. I'm going to give a hopefully an hour of talk and followed by conversations, but my style is to be interactive. So if you have any questions along the way, you don't have to necessarily wait until the end of the talk. You can ask me questions. If it takes longer to discuss, I will postpone the answering towards the end, but feel free to chime in and participate. I teach a class at Stanford on this topic. It's a whole semester class. So it's going to be a snippet of that, focusing on narrowly on hearing and a little on vision. So with that, let me get started. So there are three topics we're going to cover in this discussion, not in series, but sometimes connected with each other. Can you hear me all right? Just to make sure that I'm coming across clear to everybody before I go on.
Yes.
Yes, sir. We can hear you, sir.
Very clear.
So there are three things we're going to discuss. Number one is a brief take on the biology of sensory perception. How do we sense and understand the world around us? Number two is what happens as we get older or we subject ourselves to unhealthy levels of sensory stimulus, the sensory deficiencies that we might get. And given the short time, we're going to focus primarily on sense of hearing, sense of balance, and just a little on vision. And the last, being an engineer, I will want to share the developments in this field, specifically the combination of new miniaturized sensors and machine learning algorithms that are allowing these devices to be, I'd say, really amazing in terms of their performance, their capabilities, in their goal to not only enhance our sensory perception, but also augment it with capabilities that are beyond our biological limits. So that I hope we can discuss any other topics that I'll not be addressing in this. So let's start with human sensory perception. This is a very simple view that I've been using for years now. I should have mentioned, prior to working as the Chief Technology Officer at Starkey, for 17 years, I was a Vice President at Intel, and I visited Intel Bangalore many times. But there, I was leading a group called Perceptual Computing, where the objective was to understand how human perception works, but then copy that into machines like robots, drones, virtual reality devices, autonomous cars, etc. As I joined Starkey, the focus shifted, even though technology is the same. But the focus shifted from machine perception to enhancing human perception. So what is human perception? There are literally, as an engineer, if you simplify the complex biological system that we have, we could articulate in 4 different stages: sense, process, act, and learn. They don't necessarily go in series. Sometimes you go from sensing to learning quickly. Most typically, though, that we sense with our sensors, like your eyes, that are literally sensors for light. The ear is a great transduction device for sound, converting sound into neural pulses. Similarly, we have touch sensors throughout our body, the skin. We have smell and taste sensors, balance sensors that are inside vestibular mechanism. So all of those sensors that we have, typically those signals would be processed in the cerebral cortex in our brain. And I'm showing a picture on the left with colored blobs for the cerebral cortex. Generally speaking, I'll simplify this and talk like an engineer trying to explain neuroscience. The green blob on the back of the head is where you have computational processing for vision. So the signal from the eyes through multiple stations will get first processed in the visual cortex in the back. Similarly, the sense of hearing, all the signals that are transduced in the inner ear, I'm going to talk more about that, and they're conveyed through neural pulses through the auditory nerve fibers. They get processed on the two sides, shown in pink blobs. Those are auditory cortex. I'm going to just leave it at the blue. That's the somatosensory cortex up on the top. So all of the touch, pain signals are processed up in the somatosensory cortex. That's very closely tied to the motor cortex that then drive actions into our muscles and limbs of the body to take action. That's the part that's act. So once we sense the world, we process the information to understand what's going on. That allows us to take action. And that is whether to avoid an obstacle or smile at somebody or just say hi, so making a sound through our vocal apparatus. So that's the action block. Last but not the least is our ability to learn along the way. Of course, for many decades, this was limited to the world of biology. With amazing advances in machine learning and artificial intelligence, yes, the machines are learning. We're able to teach them, train them, and also learn based on almost like human experience, learn from data, learn from information. So, so that's what I'm going to keep at the back of the mind as I talk about technology and show you some devices. And these are really the 4 blocks that we need to embed in the system when we want to engineer devices to help people sense and understand the world better, be a device that helps them beyond their sensory facilities. So to summarize that last slide and the discussion we just had, the human sensory perception is really our window to the reality. Let's ponder about that for a second. Just think about it. We wake up in the morning, open our eyes that used to be closed when you slept, and suddenly the whole world is understandable. You can see and know what you're looking at. You hear the faint, moderate, and loud sounds, and you know that's dog barking or your family member talking to you. You can feel the warmth, the heat, the cold. You know there is a world out there. We know we can reach out and touch something. I can grab my phone. You know there is a world, there is something out there. Let's call that the reality, the real world, the physical objects, or not just the objects, but energy, whether it's energy transmitted through vibrations or air molecules that allow you to hear. Essentially, there's something out there. Let's call that reality. Our window to the reality is the sensory perception system. It's a very narrow window. Just think about eyes. They're sensitive to a very narrow range of electromagnetic spectrum, just the visible light, whereas you have infinite spectra for electromagnetic radiation. We cannot see them. We don't, if something transpires in front of us, which only reflect electromagnetic radiation at, let's say, 2 micrometer wavelength, we can see it. We don't have our narrow window to the reality doesn't allow us to see it. Think about sound. The best human auditory system, as I'll explain in the slides in the future coming up, is sensitive between tens of hertz to few kilohertz. So if you have sound waves that are below 20 hertz or above 20 kilohertz, we won't hear them. So we don't, because our window to reality is narrow. So this gets to be philosophical. If I had an hour with you, then we would discuss philosophy of what does it mean to perceive, what is reality. Because I don't have the time, I want to show you a slide that I derived from the famous science fiction movie, The Matrix. How many of you, hopefully many of you have watched this movie from 1999, where Morpheus and Neo are having a conversation. And Morpheus is asking Neo, what is real? Just a question that he asked. What is real? And Morpheus goes on to repeat his question. How do you define real? This is not just what is real, how do you define it? What's the definition of it? And here is the definition that he gives. If you're talking about what you can feel, what you can smell, what you can taste and see, then real is simply electrical signals interpreted by your brain. Just think about that for a second. This reality out there, the real world, the physical world, and the energy, to us, they wouldn't exist unless the physical stimulus, set of stimulus or stimuli, is being sensed by our sensory system, like eyes, ears, touch, smell, taste, balance, etc. And those signals are being processed in our brain. It comes down to signal processing. The way that our cerebral cortex processes those signals is what allows us to build a model of the world in our head, in our brain. We create a model of the three-dimensional world into our brain based on all the signals that we get. And we continue to refine that based on all the signals we are continuously getting. Think about it. You might look far and say, hey, that looks like a car that's coming. So based on the limited auditory and visual signal you got, you create a 3D model. And then as the thing comes close, you may say, oh, no, that's not a car. That's, that was just that's a train. So we continuously refine this model as we continue to collect these signals. So, but keep this in the back of the mind that this is all about signal processing in your brain. And that means when we create a device, we need to copy that mechanism in our technology, process the signals in a way to sense and understand the world. So now let me switch gear. And I want to, this is where I go to health and medicine just a little bit. And this is the why of this entire presentation. Why do we care about it? In fact, for me, this was the why for my life. Like when I changed my job, I left a leadership job as a vice president at Intel back in 2017 and joined to a medium-sized medical device company. This was my why. Why do I care? What do I want to do? So that's common sensory deficiencies for people around the world. First thing, so I'm going to go over rather quick, and I hope you can read up and learn a lot more about it. First thing is 500 million people. Think about that. Close to 500 million people are living with disabling hearing loss worldwide. It's estimated that this number is likely going to double by 2050. That's because we are living longer, the older population is growing, and when you get older, 70, 80 years old, almost everybody has hearing loss, and we can't follow along conversations, we can understand speech, we can't communicate very well. So this is a big problem for humanity. Next, balance. We take it for granted. As we get older, we're going to fall down and we're going to hurt ourselves. This is a big problem. 40% of the population, nearly half of all of us, will experience balance difficulty over the course of our lifetime. And that happens because the vestibular sensory system degrades as we get older. Over 3 million older people fall, get injured, and are seen in the emergency room in the US alone. You probably have to multiply that number by 10 or worldwide. Probably 30 million people, not just fall, but they're treated in emergency rooms because of fall injuries. So this is also a big problem. Next, vision. This is the most commonly addressed impairment, because the moment we cannot read a restaurant menu or a book, cannot read a book, newspaper, then we have to go run and get eyeglasses. Well, there is 1 billion people in the world with vision impairment that are yet to be addressed. And that happens because of many things: refractive errors in your lenses and optical systems, cataract, age-related macular degeneration, where the retina might detach from the back of the eyeball, glaucoma, diabetic retinopathy, etc. All kinds of reasons why you can get vision impairment. And there is 20 to 30 million people around the world who are legally blind. Just think about how they have to navigate in the world. And then I want to quickly mention smell and taste, not to be neglected. There is about 13 million people in the US. I don't have the number globally. They have measurable smell dysfunction. They cannot smell things. About a quarter of them have anosmia, means no sense of smell. Just think about it. You have no sense of smell. This is not just nice to have. Sense of smell allows us to be safe because, you know, if something is stinking, it's not healthy for us. So you need to be able to smell to stay safe. About 19%, almost 20% of Americans over 40 suffer from ageusia, and that's the degradation of sense of taste. They cannot taste food properly. So this is sort of a quick overview of all of the sensory deficiencies that people live with. So we could perhaps use technology that's getting developed so fast while they're being applied to making machines smart, like robots that can understand and navigate in the world, or cars that can drive by themselves. That was my prior life. But now I get to work on using the same technology to help people go over their barrier of sensory deficiencies. So let's look at a few areas. Let's look at first hearing, sense of audition. So I'm going to talk about this little 5 minutes or so of biology to give you a revisit of your lessons in a biology class, so that you have an appreciation for how we hear, how do we get hearing loss, and how do we use technology to help people to hear better. So before I do that, this helps a lot sometimes, because you know the sense of hearing is something we take for granted. We think it is so easy. It's all right. What is the big deal? You know, there's sound and we can hear it. I would like you to, I'm going to play some videos, audio, and I'd like you to hear the sounds. Hopefully you can hear it. And Nagamani, if you can tell me once I play the first one, whether it's audible on your side.
At the same time.
Yes, sir, it is audible.
Clear?
It's audible, sir.
Audible, okay. So now let me keep playing this. I'd like you to close your eyes and keep hearing this. Imagine what you're hearing. Close your eyes and imagine what is it that you're hearing.
Yes, sir. Some gathering is going on. That's what I can
So,
understand.
you know, you could almost feel like you have a mental image.
Yes, sir.
That Silas says club noise. Yes, I mean it's sort of like you're sitting in a restaurant. You can almost imagine the world just by listening to it. So the next one I'm going to play again. Same thing here. That was not it. This one.
It's a walking or running sound, sir.
Yes, you can almost feel like somebody's running. Okay, next one.
Yes, sir.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Lisa.
Of course.
Of birthday
Somebody
song.
singing happy birthday song, right?
Melodious birthday song, sir.
So you could very clearly, just by listening to it, imagine a world, contextual understanding of what's going on around us. And it seems so easy for us. the reality is that the signal that you're getting for all three cases, they're shown in this diagram here, where I'm plotting pressure on the y-axis, pressure in the air that's impinging on your eardrums as a function of time. Just imagine what's happening. Only thing that your body physically is receiving is the wiggling of your eardrum. That is it. Just your eardrum is wiggling because the pressure there, air pressure, is varying as a function of time, increasing, decreasing, right? So it's a wiggling pattern of pressure as a function of time. That's it. That's all your ear gets. Yet, our ability to understand what's going on based on that eardrum wiggling is profound, just profound. So obviously, it's not just a story of the eardrum. The auditory system is complex. So you got the entire ear with your ear flap, the ear canal, the three bones in your ear, and the cochlea, which is where the sound wave gets converted into neural pulses. And I'm going to discuss a bit more of that later. Those get carried by auditory nerve fibers into the cochlear nucleus that goes through the brain stem to midbrain to the thalamus, finally to the auditory cortex that I showed you in that pink blob in the last slide on the two sides of the head. That's where the first processing of the sound signal happens. And that gets fed into the sections of the brain that accumulate information from other sensory processing blocks like vision. So you bring all of that together to understand the world and make actions through your executive part of the cortex. The goal of this entire system is to detect and interpret, to understand what's going on in the world. That's all function. To survive, to enjoy, to navigate, to get around the world. That is the goal of the system. So before I show you a little bit more biology, for engineers, this slide basically summarizes the specifications of the human auditory system, human hearing. Let me explain a few key aspects to it. The y-axis is the sound pressure level, SPL. Its unit is in dB, decibel. The way dB is defined is on the right in the box. dB is 20 times log of the pressure over a reference pressure. And the reference pressure for this field is taken to be 20 micropascals. That's the barely audible pressure level that we can hear at 1 kilohertz sound wave. So that's the frequencies on the x-axis, 20 hertz on the left and 20 kilohertz on the right. That's typically seen to be the range of human hearing, although as you get older, that range narrows. So as you can see here, at 1 kilohertz, we got 0 dB of sensitivity, because 20 over 20 is 1, log of 1 is 0, 0 times 20 is 0. So this dB is 0 at 1 kilohertz for human hearing, because ideal human hearing is able to barely recognize or hear the sound if it is at 20 micropascal. Let's just throw these numbers around. Let me put this in context. Anybody knows what is the ambient pressure level in your room? Do you remember what's the sea level ambient pressure in the air? Like you do nothing, the ambient level of pressure in the air around you. What's that pressure? Well, that's 101 kilopascal. Yeah, 1 bar. Thank you, Rafkiran. 1 bar, 101 kilopascal. Think about it. 20 micropascal is, so you have 101 kilopascal and 20 micropascal. It's less than a billion, 1 billion times less in terms of the in terms of the variation you create in the air pressure, and you can still hear 1 billionth of change in the air pressure we can hear at 1 kilohertz. So this green curve here is the audibility curve, the threshold. What's the minimum? When you have perfect hearing, what's the minimum level of hearing you can, sound you can hear? 0 dB at 1 kilohertz, but at lower frequencies like 100 hertz, you have to create almost 40 dB in order for you to hear. And then, I'm going to point to the maximum sound that our system can detect is about 120 dB. That's dangerous level of sound. You don't want to hear it because it can damage your hearing system. What I want to have you look at before we leave this slide is this faint green island-like shape. That region represents conversational speech. When you talk, we create between maybe 300 to 350 hertz to about 4 kilohertz frequencies of sound. That's the range of speech. About, let's say, to simplify, let's say 400 hertz to 4 kilohertz. That's a narrow range of frequencies we use when you speak. And how about loudness when you speak? Normal voice is between about 35 decibel and the lower scale when you're whispering to about 65 decibels when you're talking loudly, 65 decibels. Now I'm probably making about, I would say 60 decibels. Just make sure that you remember this. When you talk, we are making between 400 hertz to 4 kilohertz sound at 35 decibel to 65 decibels of loudness. Please remember this. We'll come back to that. And just 1 minute on the ear, because ear is amazing engineering instrument. You have this outer ear that works as an antenna. It channels the vibrating air waves into the auditory canal or the ear canal, which is about 3 centimeters long, about 1 centimeter in diameter. So at the end of it, you have the oval-shaped eardrum, what is also called tympanic membrane. That's a biological term for it. It regrows. So if you create a hole in it or something happens, it can regrow. Every few months, it can regrow. Behind the eardrum, you have a series of 3 bones and connected with each other. Those are the smallest bones in our body, the malleus, incus, and stapes. And those are interlinked with each other to amplify the vibration. The middle ear can amplify the vibration by about 27 dB. Ear canal itself has a resonance frequency, amazingly, around the speech frequencies. So our ear shape was optimized to help us understand conversation. It can amplify by about 3 to 3.5 dB. So 3 to 3.5 decibel plus 27 decibel in the middle ear. You have between the ear canal and the middle ear bones, you have 30 decibels of amplification going on. Finally, the stapes, footstep of the stapes is imparting the vibrations onto this green inner ear, at the end of which you have the cochlea, the spiral-shaped organ, which is where you have the sensors for hearing. So let me get to the next slide. If I take a cross section of the cochlea here, it looks like this, a cross section. So you got 3 sections filled with fluid, scala vestibuli, scala tympani. So the stapes footplate in the last slide, when it vibrates, it sends a traveling wave into the fluid, which propagates through the scala vestibuli, comes back through the scala tympani, and that makes this middle, the membrane shown in the middle, called the basilar membrane, to go up and down. Now let's magnify this rectangular block on the basilar membrane and show it on the right. Here, as we magnify this, you can see there are 4 rows of tiny sensory hair cells. They're called hair cells. They're not really hair, but they're called hair cells. The one row of these hair cells that are inside are called inner hair cells. They are basically your sensors that convert those traveling waves into electrochemical neural pulses. Essentially, when the basilar membrane go up and down, and this tectorial membrane goes left and right, it brushes against the cilia, stereocilia, which opens up ion channels. And so positive ions can flow through into the inner hair cell. It depolarizes it, which induces it to release neurotransmitters, creating an electrochemical neural pulse, which can propagate into the auditory cortex via the auditory nerve fiber. And then these 3 rows of outer hair cells, they have special motor molecules which elongate or contract with response to the sound, which work to amplify the effect of sound. Particularly very low level of sound gets amplified by the actions of the outer hair cells by as much as 50 decibels. 50 decibels. So your ear, before the brain gets the signal, has the ability to amplify low levels of sound that comes into your head. It can amplify it by a total of 80 decibels. Remember I said 3 decibels in your ear canal, 27 decibels in your middle ear bones, and then 50 decibels to the outer hair cells. 80 decibels, the log scale. So divide that by 20. You got 4 orders of magnitude. That's 10 million times in the sound pressure level, billions times in the energy level. That's how sensitive, that's how much amplification we can provide to faint sound that's coming from outside. You know, I want to give you one more number to fascinate your imagination about just how incredible this device, if I can call it, is. So you already know by now, all your system is getting is a wiggling of your eardrum. That's all. So eardrum has to displace physically. The minimum amount of displacement of the eardrum that our auditory cortex can detect. So here you can hear the sound. The minimum displacement of your eardrum is comparable or on the order of an atomic diameter. Let's think about that. If your eardrum moves by a hydrogen atom diameter, you can hear it. That's just how mind-bogglingly sensitive our ear, when it's functioning well, is. So, you know, when I teach a class on this, I promise my students, but I obviously take much longer time. It take probably a couple of hours just to discuss the biology of hearing. I tell people, you will hear the world differently. You will have a different level of appreciation for what it means to hear when you learn how we hear. I hope in the short time, I was able to convey the awe, the magnificence of our hearing perception. I'm going to have to go quick. So this cochlea that I showed you has tonotopic arrangement. So it's almost like a frequency analyzer, like a Fourier transform. The base of the cochlea is responsive to high frequencies of sound, and the tip of the cochlea as you go from the base to the tip, it's responsive to lower and lower frequencies of sound. So if you pick any point on the cochlea, you have a pretty sharp frequency tuning curve. That means, if you pick this part of the cochlea here, it's very sensitive to, let's say, 3 kilohertz of sound. And then as you tune out to lower or higher frequencies, the responsivity drops. So you have a tuning curve for a specific spot on the cochlea. Now I want to talk about hearing loss, the health condition. What happens when the system doesn't work as well as I described? So let me allow me to talk about this. So what I'm showing you here is what is called an audiogram. So here's what happens. Let's say you wake up and you can hear well. You're not hearing well. You can't understand what people are saying to you. You might go to a doctor. Maybe you go to an audiologist or an ENT professional. They're going to take you through a bunch of tests. One of those tests is putting you into a sound booth, a chamber that's very quiet. It's a closed chamber. You're going to sit inside, and they're going to put 2 earbuds in your ear and play sound into that, and the instrument will be kept outside. So only thing you can hear is what is played in your ear. They're going to change the frequency, and they're going to start at very low levels of sound and increase that, or decrease it, or increase it to see where do you barely hear. What is your threshold? Where is your audibility curve? And they're going to normalize that to what's considered to be normal hearing. So the y-axis here is slightly different from the y-axis I showed you before. For an audiogram, the y-axis is the relative dB relative to what's considered normal hearing. So let's say if you need no amplification whatsoever, the sound doesn't need to be amplified, then you have 0 dB across the frequencies. So your hearing is normal. In fact, up to 20 dB, if I have to increase the sound up to 20 dB, we still consider you to have a normal hearing. However, as a function of frequencies, if we have to amplify sound between 20 to 40 decibels, then the audiologist will tell you, well, you have mild hearing loss. Between 40 to 70 decibels, you have moderate hearing loss. 70 to 90, if the sound has to be amplified between 70 to 90 decibels, then you have severe hearing loss. Above 90, you are pretty much deaf, profound hearing loss. This audiogram that I'm showing you here, the red curve for the right ear and the left for the left ear, is from a real patient. It's an older patient. Okay, now a couple of things I wanted you to remember. Speech frequency, when you talk, remember what is the range of frequencies that we create when you talk? Anybody remembers? Well, we said from about 5 kilohertz to about 4 kilohertz, roughly. That's the range of frequencies we create when you talk. How about the loudness level? Between 35 dB to 65 dB. So think about this. This person is not going to hear anything above about 2 kilohertz. Okay, I want to show you one more chart. And this one is a little deeper look at the speech. It's called speech banana because it's typically shown in green curve. Yellow curve, and it looks like a banana, right? So the point to understand here is when you take human speech and then lay it out as a function of loudness and frequency, I already said, it's roughly between few hundred hertz to few kilohertz, between 35 dB to 65 dB. But the other thing I want to draw your attention to, all the high frequencies, which are encoded in consonants, like F for first, TH like thirsty, S for Sam. Those fricative consonant fricative transitions, high frequencies, are in 4 to 5 kilohertz. All the vowels like A, E, I, O, U, R, E, those are at lower frequencies. They're pretty high in energy, but at low frequencies. Okay, now think about hearing versus understanding. Often, if you talk to somebody who has hearing loss, they'll say, hey, don't scream at me. I can hear, but I can't understand what you're saying. That's because they can hear the vowels, but not the consonants. So they can tell the difference between tub and pub, dog and hog, because they can understand the consonants at high frequencies. Look at this gentleman's high frequency, 4 to 5 kilohertz. This person has 70 to 80 decibel of loss. The speech is at 30 to 50 decibels. So there's no way that person to hear any of these high frequencies. They can't understand what's going on. Here's what I'm going to do. And this will allow you to become empathetic to people with hearing loss. What does it mean to live with hearing loss? I gave you a whole bunch of numbers, dBs and kilohertz and all kinds of things. But what does it really mean? So my colleagues at the Ear Science Institute in Australia created a simulation of hearing loss. So it is a lady who's singing a song, and its signal is going to be modified to show as you go from normal hearing to mild hearing loss, to moderate hearing loss, to severe hearing loss, and profound hearing loss. What will it appear to be to a human at different levels of hearing? So just, enjoy this for a minute or two, or appreciate it.
I know I'm young, could be a little bit wiser, but I've had my fair share of love, and I've seen enough of pain and hate and fire and ice to know the cold will suffice. Yes, to your surprise, I'm educated. Please don't underestimate me if you cannot tolerate my opinion on human rights and sacrifice. Let me give you some advice. For once in your life,
That is profound hearing loss. So let me pause here and just open up for a minute to hear you. When you went from normal to mild, maybe a little muffling of the high frequencies, but when you from mild to moderate, you start to lose the appreciation for music or conversation because you lose the high frequency transduction. And then when you went from moderate to profound, moderate to severe, that's it, and profound death. When you now interact with somebody who's hearing loss, I hope you have a different perspective. You can put yourself into their shoes and see how's life for them.
I know.
So this is what Helen Keller said. Helen Keller, who was both blind and deaf. She said, it's difficult to be blind and deaf, but if she had to get one sense back, she would want to get back the sense of hearing, because she felt blindness cuts you off from things, but deafness cuts you off from people. You can, if you can't hear people, you can communicate. And I want to show you a picture that changed my life. This is one of our patients for Starkey. And as I was debating whether to leave the world of Intel and computers and work on hearing devices, when I saw the image of this patient, I was told she is a young patient for Starkey who came in and could not hear anything. And then when she was fitted with Starkey's hearing devices, the device was turned on, she could suddenly hear mommy's voice. Mommy was sitting right there. just look at her face, the disbelief, the awe, and she cried and sobbed. And so that I felt would be a different meaning to life as an engineer. Because as I said, 500 million people live with hearing loss. That number is only increasing. So with that, I want to switch now to technology and what can we do as engineers. So we can help these people. First, this is not a new technology. Anybody knows this gentleman on the slide? Famous person. This is Hedwig van Beethoven. You might be enjoying Beethoven's music. Beethoven was having significant hearing loss. Towards the end of his life, he died young. As you can see, 1770 to 1827, so 57 years. Towards the end of his life, he had such profound hearing loss that after performing, he had to turn back to see the audience clap because he could not hear them clap. So yet he was performing, he was amazing. So the device that you see he's using is an ear trumpet. That was the first hearing aid. It would amplify sound simply by channeling the sound waves from a larger opening aperture into a smaller one. So you have a mechanical amplification of sound energy. These are the hearing aids of mid-1900s to late 1900s. Big, bulky, body-worn devices to collect sound signals, convert them into amplified versions, and play them in your ear through the earbud. And devices become smaller. So these are the hearing aids of 2009. The devices were still sort of like ugly. This is an article from BBC in September 2009. And the article says there is a shame, there is a stigma that people have when they wear hearing aids. Well, no wonder these devices look ugly. They are, just look at this, right? They're not pleasant designs. So I felt there is an opportunity back in, I'd say 2017 timeframe when I joined this industry. I felt there was an opportunity to transform hearing aids. And this is a slide that I put together back in 2017, that there are 3 areas we could focus on. First area is to improve the design. Make them as small as you can, make them as pleasant as you can, as discreet as you can. Make them rechargeable. So you could charge it overnight and have it on. You need all day battery life, so you can charge in the night and that's it. You forget about it all day. Intelligent hearing. Bring machine learning and AI techniques to understand the nature of the sound and decide what part of the sound should be amplified by how much for every patient, given everybody's hearing loss is different for different frequencies. So you need frequency-dependent amplification, but also with AI, can we make it sound-dependent amplification? So if you are, what I mean by that, if you're in a cafeteria, all you're doing is your drum is vibrating, but some of that vibration is because of speech that somebody's talking in front of you. Some of that is because of background noise. And we use AI to distinguish between the two, learn the unique signatures in the audio signal that's associated with speech versus noise. And then can we classify noise at different levels? Machine noise, wind noise, the spoon clattering on the table, the car passing by. Can we treat them differently? Can we allow the patient to optimize? So you might be sitting back and enjoying the cafeteria sound. So you don't want to suppress the background in that case. On the other hand, when you're having a meeting, you might want to suppress noise and amplify speech. So that was a huge opportunity to bring in modern AI algorithms to improve hearing aids. Next, in the middle, if you have the device in your ear, what else can it do? Could we embed sensors to turn them into monitor for your health conditions? No hearing aid had ever done it before. Last but not the least, can we connect these devices via your smartphone to the cloud and turn your in-ear devices into your very own virtual assistant? So those are big goals that we took back in 2017. First, let me show you the designs. So hearing aids now look like this. They're tiny. They can be tucked behind your ear. In fact, it's not fair because I'm sitting in front of a camera, but I'm not in the room, in front of the room with you. Because now I should be asking you, did you realize I am actually wearing these devices? I don't have hearing loss, but I still use these devices all the time as my virtual assistant. When I pull out, you can see that these are the devices I'm showing you on the screen. They're designed to look nice. They're designed to sit behind your ear. And even if you're in front of me, you can't really see me wearing them. This tube that connects the device to the transducer in the ear is transparent. And then, the industry has other devices that look and feel like consumer electronic earbuds. And then the industry also has completely invisible devices that can go deeply in the ear canal and sit in there. There's nothing behind the ear, like the one I'm showing you here and on the slide. These devices connect to your smartphones and can stream audio from the phone into the device directly, whether your phone call, audiobooks, podcast. So they're like your earbud, but with all-day battery life. So while that is really good, let me now show you what the magic, the miracle that AI is bringing to this field. And I call that superhuman healing. Even with our amazing sensory system, the machines can do better than normal hearing. I call it superhuman hearing. And how do you do that? So for a long time, for decades, the field of auditory neuroscience was focused on creating a computational model of human auditory system. And it was limited to what I'm showing you here on the right block. The computational model for the auditory system, where you go from the sound wave up on the top, hopefully now recognize that to be variation of the pressure waves. And as you go through the signal processing blocks, first thing you do is lay it out as a series of frequency-dependent pass band filters. On the left, you have low frequencies, and on the right, you have the higher frequencies. You got a bank of filters, like what happens in the cochlea. So in your signal processing, we have a block that does Fourier analysis and splits the sound signal into narrow band of frequencies, going from low frequencies to high frequencies. Next stage is to copy what happens in the outer hair cells of the cochlea. Remember where I said you have high amplification for low levels of sound and then low amplifications for low levels of sound. So that is a nonlinear amplifier. So in our signal processing, we create a bank of nonlinear amplification blocks, a series of them. Next, here you go beyond the cochlea and you're going to midbrain and brainstem and midbrain areas, where you have amplitude modulators at low frequencies. They can differentiate between slowly varying signals to slightly rapidly varying signals. So for the longest time, the focus of engineers was just this. However, with AI, now we are able to add a block that is a deep neural network model that copies the cortical processing in auditory cortex, where we have the understanding of speech versus noise, car versus vacuum cleaner, music versus background noise. And the magical part of this is that we can train this neural network with lots of data. So as long as you have pairs of data of clean speech and noisy speech, we can train this neural network to create clean speech from noisy speech. This is where the real breakthrough of this field is happening now with AI. And we are able to do things that 10 years ago would have been considered not possible with hearing aids. I want to give you a demo. It's the hardest part. Presenting over WebEx I'm not in the room. Hopefully you can still understand what's going on by just listening. So this demo is a real scenario. You can see my engineers, researchers in our cafeteria. First half is going to be a typical noisy environment in the cafeteria where Matt is trying to talk and you won't have much understanding of what he's trying to say. Second half of this demo is when we process the sound through a deep neural network. And the deep neural network was trained with a whole bunch of data to be able to understand the speech components in complex acoustic signal and clean up the signal. So let me play this.
I looked up and that light is the red arrow. So there was green for the straight ahead direction, and the arrow was red. And I'm just staring at it for a moment, thinking, this is really strange. For a good 2 or 3 seconds, I'm seeing cars, 2, 3.
So there were two parts again. The first part was raw signal, as you would hear if you're sitting there. Second half was clean through Starkey's deep neural network. Let me play this just one more time so you can see the contrast, hear the contrast.
And I looked up and that light is the red arrow. So there was green for the straight ahead direction, and the arrow was red. And I'm just staring at it for a moment, thinking, this is really strange. For a good 2 or 3 seconds, I'm seeing cars, 2, 3.
Did you hear the difference between the first part and the second part?
Yes, sir.
So that's the miracle. This would have been considered to be impossible 10 years ago. Because remember, this is not a consumer electronic device that that's easy to do with consumer electronic device, a big bulky device that blocks your ear, and you can do all kinds of signal processing, high power. For a tiny hearing aids that you need to clean up speech from noise without deep neural network would have been considered impossible. And this is the part where we go beyond the sensory function of hearing. We can embed sensors in them. We did embed sensors in them to track your physical activity and measure your social engagement. Personal assistant. These devices, you can simply double tap and ask a question. It's connected to the cloud. You can ask, who's the president of India? What's the weather outside? Remind me when I have to take my medicine. It can translate languages, transcribe speech. Maybe you speak Tamil and you're talking to somebody who only speaks Hindi. Maybe they can convert between these two. Tracking health. So you have sensors embedded in these tiny devices that can accurately classify standing, walking, sitting, running actions. It can classify them with a machine learning algorithm. And more amazing, it can detect fall very accurately. So if the patient falls down, it can detect it, send signal, via text message to loved ones. And of course, if the patient fell and doesn't need help, they can cancel it within 60 seconds. If not, your caregivers are going to get a message from that, somebody fell. Measuring social engagement, because we can measure speech. We can accurately classify speech. So if your older relative is socially withdrawn and not having conversations, you can be alerted, because social withdrawal and being lonely is create an onset of dementia and Alzheimer's, all kinds of cognitive declines. So this is an important vector to measure. I need to brag a little bit. Bloomberg Businessweek wrote an article about my product, and they said the future of wearable technology is called a hearing aid. I really like the way they wrote it. Even if your ears are fine, you might want a device that translates languages, tracks fitness, and monitors vital signs. We won the Times Best Invention Award in 2019 with this. In 2020, we got the AI Breakthrough Award. In fact, in 2022, just earlier this year, we got the AI Excellence Award for our device. This is an article that I wrote recently, November 2021, in IEEE Computer Magazine. That is a fairly comprehensive review of this technology. It's open source. Please read it. And if you have any questions, let me know about it. I'd love to have conversations with you guys on. Those of you who are researching machine learning or AI would love to have a conversation with you. So let me ask Nagamani, do I have more time, or because if I have another 5 minutes, I'll talk about vision. Otherwise, I'll end right here.
Sure, sir. You can continue.
Okay. So let me take the next 5 to 10 minutes talk about vision and sight, and what is possible when you combine technologies for vision aid with AI and hearing aid with AI, and combine them together. So to do that, let me remind you, for those of you that are computer vision researchers, this was my wall for 15 plus years. Back in 2010, the state of the art in the field was not good enough. This is a quote from the 2010 book by Richard Zeliski on computer vision. It was a very popular book back then. I have a copy of it here. He said, the dream of having a computer interpret an image at the same level as a 2-year-old child remains elusive. So computer vision was not good enough in 2010. However, it all changed in 2015 with the introduction of convolutional neural network into the field of vision back in 2011, 2012. And the whole world of computer vision changed. This chart is from Stanford Imagenet Visual Recognition Challenge. You can see the best performing computer vision model, their visual recognition accuracy plotted against time. And you can see the human ability to recognize those complex images that are used in the Stanford competition. We are at about 95% as humans. So back in 2010, the best computer vision system was far inferior to human ability, which is when Richard Zeliski's book said it's hopeless. You cannot build a practical system with it. And then you can look at this relentless improvement. And in 2015, the computer vision accuracy surpassed the human object recognition accuracy. Now, the machine's ability with computer vision, with neural network, far surpasses human accuracy. No wonder you can have autonomous car driving around better than human drivers. So in our domain here, I have the opportunity to collaborate with an Israeli company called Audiogram. run by Professor Amnon Shashua, who was a colleague of mine at Intel during the Intel days. But in the Starkey days, my team and his team collaborated to pair this vision aid device with our hearing aids. This vision aid device is a battery-powered, self-contained AI system for vision. It can help recognize faces, expressions on the faces, and recognize objects, recognize basic gestures to help blind people understand the basic visual world and translate that into sound and play through the hearing aids of Starkey. Let me show you a demo so you can see what's possible with this technology.
Text reading. A large rose tree stood near the entrance of the garden. The roses growing on it were white, but there were 3 gardeners. Face recognition. Jane. Money notes detection. $50. Product identification. Oatmeal squares cinnamon. Barcode. Sausalito cookies, 7.2 ounce bag.
So that's the capability of this device to allow blind people to translate the world of vision into the world of sound. So you can hear the world, even when there is no sound. We use AI to translate the visual world into a stream of text, which is converted into spoken words through your hearing aids. We're getting amazing feedback from people who are blind, visually impaired, and they also happen to have hearing loss. So not only you're converting the visual world into sound, we are also amplifying that to compensate for the hearing loss spectrum. So that was my last slide. I would like to see what questions you might have that I might be able to answer, or what might we want to discuss in terms of technology, the biology behind sensory deficiency, and the use of technology to help people live better lives.
Participants, do you have any questions? You can type in the chat box, or you can ask by unmuting yourself. If you want to interact, we will unmute you. Anyone would like to talk or ask any question?
Good evening, sir, and also good morning.
Yeah, please.
Okay. Sir, how much power it is required to energize that nerve cells in terms of power?
So I didn't talk about power much. I only talked about AI and features and capabilities.
Okay. No. Just because just understand from that cochlea how much power is required for the nerve cells to energize. I read somewhere it is in terms of picowatts and microwatts power is required. Okay.
Yeah, so you could easily translate. There are 2 levels of power. How much power from the sound that's coming in that you can convert from the dBs, sound pressure level, and from there it's easy to translate into the energy level. It's in microwatts, and the barely minimum level is in picowatts. The other level of power is how much power do I need in the device to process all the signals. That's in milliwatts. So yes, it goes from picowatts in human system to nano microwatts for the amount of energy we consume in understanding those. And then the device consuming milliwatts to make up for it.
Okay. Now, profoundly deaf, is the nerve cells is functioning?
So if we have so there could be two kinds of deafness. One where only thing that is not working is the cochlea. So let's say all those hair cells are not functional anymore, but the sensory pathway from the synaptic connection between hair cells and the auditory nerve fiber and the auditory nerve fiber itself is intact. In that case, you can help them with either hearing aids or with cochlear implant. But if the deafness is because of a tumor in the auditory nerve and the nerve is damaged, then we cannot help them with technology, whether hearing aids or cochlear implants.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Any other questions from the participants?
Ma'am, I have one question.
Yeah, sure, ma'am.
Sir, thank you so much for the interesting session, for taking us from the biology to the technology of hearing aids and hearing loss things. So my question is like, the human auditory system is so complex. Now are we built with so sophisticated tools, computational tools that can really match the capacities of our auditory system, or do you still face any challenges in building this?
That's a great question. So first, I'll say we are nowhere near in matching the amazing abilities of human system. We're nowhere near. I think we are just barely scratching the surface of implementing a bit of algorithm that works like the human system, and that's already significant step up from what these devices were able to do before and what they can do now. To give you an example, even 5 years ago, these hearing aids could only amplify sound blindly. Any sound that comes in has to be amplified. The only thing you could do is amplify differently for different frequencies. But with AI, we can now amplify based on the nature of the sound, like amplify speech, don't amplify wind noise. If the door slams shut, quickly detect the fast rising sound and don't amplify that. These are possible with machine learning and AI. I think we're taking a small step towards learning from the way that human cerebral cortex processes information. Just like I said, computer vision, when it adopted convolutional neural network, it was a significant step up on its capabilities. We're now taking those steps with sound processing using AI. We're nowhere near the amazing abilities of human perception system, but we are taking steps in the journey.
Okay, thank you. It means like the modern systems which we build now should be able to understand the complexities of both our neural system as well as auditory systems.
Yes. Yep. That's a again, one way to look at it is up until the invention of AI and integration of AI into hearing aids, you only focused on amplifying, so focus on the ear. But when you go into speech enhancement, you're trying to do part of what brain does, right? Not just amplifying the sound, but also processing and understanding the sound and amplifying it.
Okay, there's a question from Ashwini Hola. The challenge was in silicon or in compute power?
Yeah, thank you for asking that question. Actually, those two are connected together. Think about the power budget. First of all, let me talk about the power budgets. So this device here has a 20 milliamp hour rechargeable battery, very tiny battery inside, 20 milliamp hour. And I need to provide you at least 10 to 20 hours of battery life, 10 hours minimum, ideally 20 hours, so that throughout the entire day, you don't have to charge it. So if you take 20 milliamp hour battery capacity and 10 hours of operation, I only have budget for 2 milliamp current draw from the battery. So within that, we have to squeeze in all of the signal processing, including machine learning, AI classification, the Bluetooth radio connection with the phone, audio streaming from the phone, all of the function needs to be done with no more than 2 milliamp peak current consumption. It's milliwatts of power I can dedicate to the silicon. Unlike your smartphone that has orders of magnitude higher battery capacity, so you can put in stronger CPU, stronger computation system. So we have to develop such power efficient AI algorithms that it doesn't draw the power. So that's the engineering challenge in our team, and which is why it's difficult. It's not easy.
Okay, thank you, sir. Thank you.
Any other questions from the participants?
Yeah, I think she had another.
There is one more question, sir.
Yeah.
From Ashwini. Battery charge recharge cycles are limited, also with silicon having challenges in withstanding heat.
Right.
What works be the lifespan of the device?
Good question. So there are two kinds of batteries in hearing aids. The most modern version, like I showed you here, is rechargeable. So you can simply put it in a charger. And so those are lithium-ion rechargeable batteries. And like Ashwini pointed out, they have a finite number of charge-recharge cycles, just like your Tesla car or your iPhone, right? But we have to make sure they've got many years of life for that battery. We provide warranty for 3 years. So within 3 years, if you have any problem, you can return the device. Ideally, the device needs to last more than 3 years, but we have warranty currently up to 3 years. They can last many more years. Other type of device actually have tiny replaceable zinc air batteries inside. They're not rechargeable. They're tiny zinc air batteries that you could replace manually. And you can throw out the old batteries. They cost tens of cents and put in new batteries. These batteries can last a whole week, but they're not rechargeable. So you have two kinds of batteries. Hopefully that answers your question.
Thank you, sir. Is there any other questions from the participants? If no, then sir, it was a really wonderful session, sir. And especially that vision to sound is the technology is very, very good, and it will be definitely actually a boon to our visually impaired persons, and they'll be very happy to use this device, sir. Thank you very much for your inspiring session, and it was very informative, and thank you so much, sir, for your time. And thank you all the participants for joining the session and for interacting with our speaker. Thank you so much, all the participants. Shailesh sir, do you have anything to speak?
Nothing. Thanks a lot, Tachman.
Thanks a lot, sir.
Thank you very again. Thank you for inviting me. I enjoyed the opportunity despite the online format. Hopefully in the future I get to see some of you in person, whether during my next visit to India or when you come to the US. I look forward to staying in touch.
Yeah.
Certainly, sir. We would like to have us, association in future as well. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you all the participants. Thank you so much.